There was a time when seeing Brazil's name on a World Cup bracket was enough to make every opponent nervous. It didn't matter who stood on the other side. History always seemed to wear yellow. For decades, Brazil didn't simply play football. They defined it. Every tournament felt like another chapter in a story written by legends. But football has a cruel memory. It doesn't care what you achieved 20 years ago. It only remembers what happened last. And for an entire generation of football fans, Brazil stopped being the team that conquered the world. They became the team that almost did. Almost reached the final. Almost looked unstoppable. Almost won the sixth star. Until everything collapsed. Every 4 years, the same script repeated itself. Hope turned into silence. Confidence turned into heartbreak. And millions of Brazilian supporters were left asking the same painful question. What happened to the greatest football nation on earth? The answer isn't as simple as losing matches. It goes much deeper than that. Because Brazil didn't lose their talent. They lost something far more important. Their identity. For years, the Selecao looked caught between two different worlds. One side wanted to preserve the beautiful football that made Brazil famous. The other wanted to survive in a sport that had become faster, stronger, and far more tactical than ever before. Neither side truly won. And Brazil paid the price. While Europe continued evolving, Brazil often looked like a giant trying to remember how it once ruled the world. The names were still incredible. The talent was undeniable. The expectations never disappeared. Yet every World Cup ended with another painful lesson. People started saying the impossible. Maybe Brazil were no longer the kings of football. Maybe the yellow shirt had become heavier than any player could carry. For a country built on football dreams, those words felt almost unforgivable. But then, something quietly began to change. Not with fireworks. Not with impossible promises. Not with revolutionary speeches. With calm. With discipline. With experience. And perhaps the most unexpected decision Brazilian football had ever made. Instead of searching for another local hero, Brazil searched for someone who had already conquered football everywhere else. A manager who had lifted the biggest trophies. A manager respected by superstars. A manager who rarely needed to raise his voice because his career spoke louder than words. Carlo Ancelotti. At first, many people questioned the decision. Some called it desperate. Others believed a foreign coach could never understand what wearing the Brazilian badge truly meant. But Ancelotti wasn't trying to recreate the Brazil of Pelé. He wasn't trying to copy the Brazil of Ronaldo. He wasn't chasing memories. He was building something new. Something designed for modern football. And that may have been exactly what Brazil had been missing all along. The transformation wasn't obvious overnight. There were difficult moments. Unexpected defeats. Performances that raised more questions than answers. But underneath those results, something different was happening. Brazil were becoming harder to break. Harder to surprise. Harder to control. For the first time in years, every player seemed to understand exactly what the team needed from them. There were no unnecessary risks. No panic. No chaos. Only patience. The kind of patience that wins tournaments. Then the World Cup arrived. Suddenly, every decision Ancelotti had made was placed under the brightest spotlight in football. Millions watched. Millions doubted. Millions waited to discover whether Brazil had truly changed, or whether history was about to repeat itself again. The opening matches didn't answer every question. But they revealed something important. This Brazil no longer depended on moments of magic alone. They could dominate without entertaining. They could suffer without collapsing. They could defend without fear. And perhaps most importantly, they could wait. Because this team understood that 90 minutes are never decided in the first 20. Every match felt like a chess game. Every substitution carried purpose. Every tactical adjustment slowly drained belief from the opponent. Brazil weren't trying to impress anyone. They were trying to survive long enough to strike. That made them far more dangerous than many people realized. Then came the match that changed everything. Not because Brazil played perfectly, but because they didn't. For long periods, they looked uncomfortable. The opponent pressed aggressively, won important duels, controlled possession, forced mistakes. For a while, the old doubts returned. Social media exploded. Pundits questioned the system. Fans feared another nightmare. Because everyone had seen this movie before. Brazil starts confidently. Something goes wrong. Pressure increases. The team loses control. The tournament slips away. It had happened too many times. Except, this time, something felt different. On the touchline, Ancelotti never looked worried. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't asking players to do impossible things. He simply watched. Studied. Waited. Almost as if he already knew the match hadn't truly begun yet. That calm spread across the squad. Instead of forcing attacks, Brazil slowed the game. Instead of chasing the ball, they chased the right moments. Little by little, momentum changed. The opponent began running more. Brazil began thinking more. One mistake. One opening. One perfectly timed movement. That was all they needed. And when it finally arrived, everything changed. Not just the score. The feeling. The confidence. The belief. For years, Brazil had been searching for proof that this generation could respond under pressure. Now they finally had it. They didn't win because they played beautiful football. They won because they refused to lose. Sometimes, that is the difference between a talented team and a future world champion. But what happened after that victory was even more fascinating. Because the headlines celebrated the comeback. Very few people noticed the deeper story hiding underneath. A story that could completely change the balance of this World Cup. And once you see it, you will understand why so many experts have quietly started placing Brazil among the biggest favorites once again. Because the biggest story surrounding Brazil has never been about talent. It has always been about timing. For more than 2 decades, Brazil produced world-class players almost every single generation. Superstars played for the biggest clubs. Ballon d'Or contenders wore the yellow shirt. Champions League winners filled the squad. Yet somehow, when the World Cup reached its most unforgiving stage, everything fell apart. It happened once. Then twice. Then again. Until disappointment stopped feeling like an accident and started feeling like a pattern. Every Brazilian supporter can remember exactly where that cycle began. France. Then the Netherlands. Then Germany. Then Belgium. Then Croatia. Different opponents. Different managers. Different generations. The ending never changed. Each tournament seemed to steal another piece of Brazil's confidence. The pressure became heavier. The expectations became louder. Every knockout match carried the weight of 24 years. And football can be merciless when players begin carrying history instead of simply playing the game. That is why Carlo Ancelotti never tried to erase Brazil's past. He tried to remove its fear. Instead of reminding the squad about 5 World Cups, he reminded them about the next 90 minutes. Instead of asking players to become heroes, he asked them to trust each other. Simple ideas. Simple football. But sometimes simplicity is the hardest thing to master. That change became visible everywhere on the pitch. Brazil stopped forcing impossible passes. They stopped attacking with desperation. Every movement had purpose. Every player understood when to accelerate and when to slow everything down. It was no longer 11 individuals searching for brilliance. It had become one team searching for victory. That is a dangerous transformation. Because once confidence begins replacing anxiety, football suddenly becomes much easier. And no player represents that change better than Vinícius Jr. For years, people admired his pace, his dribbling, his creativity. But with the national team, something always seemed incomplete. The explosive winger seen every week at club level rarely appeared wearing Brazil's colors. Now, that version has finally arrived. He no longer waits for the match to find him. He goes looking for it. Every touch demands attention. Every run forces defenders backwards. Every attack begins with the belief that something extraordinary could happen. Yet perhaps his greatest improvement isn't technical. It's psychological. He now plays with the confidence of someone who knows the entire system believes in him. That confidence changes everything. But Brazil's future doesn't stop there. Because waiting behind him is another name already capturing the imagination of football fans around the world. Endrick. Some teenagers enter major tournaments hoping to gain experience. Endrick enters matches trying to change them. His energy feels different. His movement feels fearless. He attacks every loose ball as though the entire tournament depends on it. Those are qualities that cannot be taught. They belong to players who believe pressure is an opportunity, not a burden. Then there's the heartbeat of the midfield. Casemiro. Many assumed his greatest years were behind him. Instead, he became the balance this new Brazil desperately needed. He doesn't need to score every week. He doesn't need spectacular highlights. His biggest contribution is making everyone around him better. Beside him, Bruno Guimaraes controls the rhythm. Fast when the moment demands urgency. Patient when the game demands intelligence. Together they have given Brazil something every champion eventually needs. Control. Because World Cups are rarely won by the most entertaining team. They are usually won by the team that understands moments better than everyone else. Look at the defense. Marquinhos. Gabriel. Alisson. 3 players with different personalities, working as one unit. For years Brazil relied on scoring more than the opposition. Now they understand another truth. Great champions don't just score goals. They remove hope. Every clean sheet quietly increases belief inside the squad, while slowly destroying belief outside it. That psychological battle matters. Especially in knockout football. And perhaps that is why opponents now approach Brazil differently. Not with excitement. With caution. Because this team no longer gives away emotional moments. If Brazil scores first, they become even more difficult to chase. If Brazil concedes first, they no longer panic. That emotional stability may become their greatest weapon. History has shown that tournaments are rarely decided by the best attack alone. They are decided by the teams that remain calm when everything around them becomes chaotic. That is exactly what Ancelotti has built. Not the flashiest Brazil. Not the most unpredictable Brazil. Perhaps the smartest Brazil we have seen in many years. Which raises one fascinating question. What happens if this team continues improving with every match? What happens if Vinicius reaches another level? If Endrick keeps growing? If Neymar returns fully fit at exactly the right moment? If experience and youth peak together, at the perfect time? Suddenly the impossible doesn't feel impossible anymore. Because lifting the World Cup has never been about having the biggest names. It is about becoming the strongest team. And quietly, without demanding attention, without making impossible promises, Brazil may have become exactly that. The yellow shirt still carries history. But it no longer carries fear. The scars remain. The painful memories will never disappear. Yet for the first time in a very long time, those memories are no longer controlling the future. Football always gives great nations another chance. Not because they deserve it. Because they are willing to evolve. Brazil have spent 24 years searching for the path back to the top of world football. Now, that road finally seems visible. Whether they lift the trophy or not, one truth has already become impossible to ignore. The world is no longer watching Brazil because of what they achieved decades ago. The world is watching because of what they might achieve next. And that is exactly why every remaining nation should be paying attention. Because if this Brazil continues growing at the same speed, the race for the World Cup may already have a favorite. Not because of history. Not because of reputation. But because this team has rediscovered something every champion must possess. Belief. And once Brazil truly believes again, the rest of the football world usually pays the price.